that reparations, by and large, have already been made to Black Americans through the 1964 Civil Rights Act and through affirmative action programs, through cultural reparations, I argue, have been made through Black Studies programs, the 1972 Employment Act, that a free society can really go no further in making restitution to a group of people who might have been suffering from the residual effects of slavery.
Are those financial reparations?
No, because there are no slaves still alive today. There can be no, on my reasoning, going by the logic of the Civil Liberties Act of 1988, there can be no direct financial compensation.
Antoinette in Philadelphia.
Yes, good morning. I'm calling because, if I may speak, I've been a foundational Black American all my life. Reparations is the law. Now, sir, for you to try to speak for me, and you're not even from this country, you're not even a part of the cause and effect of slavery. A lot of our problems stem from slavery. We've never had an opportunity equally. We've never had a chance to. We've had inventions that were stolen. We have our language that was stolen. Everything was stolen from us, and now what we are doing is demanding what is owed to us.
Okay, we'll get a response, caller. Professor Hill.
First of all, I'm speaking on behalf of you. Second of all, you have no business telling me what I have not or have not experienced in this country. I came to America when I was 20 years old. I lived in the Deep South, and I've lived here for 38 years, and I've experienced myself as a Black man living in America.
So, brothers and sisters, that Jamaican American professor, his name is Jason De Here. What he said sparked a lot of reaction online. He wrote a book called What Do White Americans Owe Black People? And in that book, he argued that Black Americans should stop asking for reparations. According to him, things like Civil Rights Act, government programs, and the progress that made after slavery already addressed that debt. But a lot of Black Americans are not agreeing with him at all. In fact, they are coming out strongly, explaining why what he said does not reflect the reality. So in this video, I want us to first listen to these Black Americans and understand both sides.
I had grown a little bit tired of what I call the Americophobia that I thought was suffusing our culture, hatred of America because it's a good country. And I saw the reparations movement, that is the idea that whites owe Blacks reparations because of either the residual effects of slavery, because of something called systemic racism, which I don't think exists anymore, or because of ancestral guilt. I thought was quite divisive in and of itself, that reparations had been already paid in the form of affirmative action in the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which in itself brought Blacks full legal standing before the law and terminated and ended formal state oppression for Blacks. So legal oppression ended with the 1964 Civil Rights Act, the 1972 Employment Act, and the 1965 Voting Rights Act. And I think we have become a culture of entitlement and a cult of victimology has really descended on this culture. And I don't think that races can reconcile. I think individuals, as individuals, can seek reconciliation among themselves. I don't believe in the idea of racial reconciliation because that's a sort of a collectivist viewpoint. I believe that individuals acting under the auspices of the grace of God will reconcile among themselves. So I decided to write this book because I thought reparations was really, really highly divisive. And the idea that it could bring the races together was ridiculous, that it would further just divide the races and to try to induce guilt into white people into thinking that because their ancestors might have owned slaves, which again is another fallacy. The majority of white Americans living today, according to my research, indicate that their ancestors came after the Civil War. So when we're sort of tempted to go with the ancestral argument, which is a form of collectivism, it just wouldn't even work. So I wanted to sort of put an end to this notion that I wanted to take the reparations argument seriously and to look at them and then to debunk them and to show that reparations have already been made and continue to be made towards Blacks in this country.
Gone are the days that we're going to allow people to come in to America and start speaking on our behalf on platforms and saying they act like they're our representative You got to think about it. Our fight and everything that we have done open up the door for people like Jason Hill to come here where he can have $120 in his pocket. Dude, you're a liar. Because when you may have $120 in your pocket, but you didn't keep that 120. You got all kind of immigrant programs that y'all still getting them now. Billions of dollars have been going to the migrants, and American citizens not getting a thing. People are sick and tired of that mess. But I'm so glad that the delineation movement has happened, because have you noticed, ever since the delineation movement has happened, now we're slowly starting to get some things done. So the delineation movement has actually been a beautiful thing for Black America. And we got to keep that up. We got to keep letting all of them and white America know you can't put none of them in a place talking about they speaking for Black America, because we're going to check them immediately, and we're going to check you too. You say, he don't speak for us. Now, you're welcome to speak for the Jamaican American community. You're welcome to go speak in your homeland. Speak there. That's where you should keep your expertise. But when it comes to us as Black Americans, no. We're going to have Black American representation, talk about Black American issues. And when it comes to reparations, we got to have all Black Americans hand on deck anyway. See, y'all have to understand, with the delineation movement, a lot of people like Jason Hill, they don't like it. Because we gonna mess their bag up. Because see, what happens is the folks use them and give them positions to trip us up. You know what I'm saying? See, they use people like Jason Hill for them diversity numbers. Because let's call it what it is. They rather Jason Hill in a quote unquote Black position than a Black American brother or sister.
You heard this Jamaican man get his funky ass up on a platform where thousands of people can hear and see him and say that we already got reparations because of the Civil Rights Act. You cannot be serious. And because of DEI, which pale-faced women heavily benefited from. And the Civil Rights Act, that's when all of them started migrating over here. So we had to share our reparations with everybody, with every goddamn immigrant class in the world. We had to share our reparations with him. He was able to bring his tether head ass over here because of the Civil Rights Act. He was able to come over here and go to school and become a professor because of the blood, sweat, and tears of Black Americans. And shouts out to that woman that called in, because I'm tired of us letting it slide. We're no longer sitting down and turning a blind eye. And whenever I come across these videos, I'm going to post them, because when I do my panels and when we talk about it, immigrants, they get up there and they swear, oh God, that we're all lying. Nobody said that. Why do you guys have a problem? You're not saying anything about the pale face man. Y'all, first of all, we can multitask. And second of all, people that look like us is more dangerous, because you would think, oh, this is a Black person saying that they don't need this. Black people are saying that they're ungrateful, and Black people, because they've been flat blacking us and putting us all under the same umbrella, not realizing that we are not the same people. We're not cut from the same cloth. We don't have the same lineage. And he gonna say, can't nobody tell me I'm not speaking on behalf of you. Yes, you are. You wrote a whole book. You wrote a whole book. Literally, these people, ones like him in particular, have literally stepped on the backs of Black Americans to become successful. And then they will get up there and undermine us and talk down on us and puff up their chest and act like they're better and act like they are in a position to say anything about what we deserve. In Jamaica, they're trying to get reparations. Why don't he take his funky ass to Jamaica and talk out against CARICOM? You know why? Because the Jamaicans ain't going for it. And now we're no longer going for it. And that's why everybody crashing out, throwing up, and ready to jump off and dive off a cliff. Because we're no longer going for it. We're calling it out. How dare that Jamaican man get up there and talk about civil rights was our reparations? As if right before civil rights, or and even after, we weren't getting hung from a tree like a piece of strange fruit. Our schools and our communities and our churches were being burned down. As if we haven't experienced police brutality, as if we haven't experienced the crack epidemic, as if we haven't experienced uh school to prison pipeline, then flooding our neighborhoods with firearms. It's been a lot going on. Millions of acres of our land that was stolen. Bridges built through our cities and our communities. It's so much deeper than just slavery. I'm tired of these people. I am so tired of immigrants that have the same color of complexion or similar phenotypes speaking against Black Americans. He needs to mind his business. He does not share the same history. He does not share the same culture. He does not share the same trauma. He needs to mind his business and speak on and make a book about why Jamaicans don't deserve reparations. It gets to a point. What y'all think about this? Spread love is the Brooklyn way. This is why. This is why. Yet they'll get up here and pretend like we never said. And he's been here for 35 years or 30 years or however long, however many years. And you think he hasn't been going around spewing this hateful rhetoric or going around using his voice to say these same exact things for the past 2 or 3 decades? You got to be out of your mind if you think that he hasn't been cooning out like this. It's been happening, and we're finally saying something back. So I don't want to hear nobody try to gaslight and act like, oh, we don't say that. Yes, y'all do. Yes, y'all do. Prime example.
Hill is a philosophy professor at DePaul University, joining us this morning to this part of our series looking at Black History Month. Professor Hill, you wrote a book, What Do White Americans Owe Black People? How did you answer that question?
My argument is that reparations, by and large, have already been made to Black Americans through the 1964 Civil Rights Act and through affirmative action programs, through cultural reparations, I argue, have been made through Black Studies programs, and basically, the 1972 Employment Act, and that a free society can really go no further in making restitution to a group of people who might have been suffering from the residual effects of slavery.
For somebody to write a book about something means that they're committed to that topic on another level. So he is hard set dedicated to the idea of Black Americans not getting reparations because he says that we already got it through the civil rights movement and through affirmative action, which for the most part, Black Americans were not the only ones who were benefiting from affirmative action. That was like all minorities, including white females.
Are those financial reparations?
No, because there are no slaves still alive today. There can be no, on my reasoning, going by the logic of the Civil Liberties Act of 1988, there can be no direct financial compensation.
I find this kind of stuff to be really disturbing because why are you so committed to something that has nothing to do with you? You're not the descendant of chattel slavery in the continental United States. So why are you over here writing whole books and whole dissertations or whatever on why another group of people that you're not a part of should not get something? It has nothing to do with you. And see, this is the type of stuff that frustrates Black Americans. This is the reason why we have a lot of these back and forths are starting to really go on, because people are seeing like, why are you inserting yourself into something that has nothing to do with you and trying to shut down something that has nothing to do with you? You're basically undermining a plight of Black Americans. I think that people are terrified of Black Americans having some sort of economic power or growth. I really think that that's what it is, because there's just nothing else could make sense. There isn't any other reason. There must be a fear of Black Americans getting some sort of financial compensation or having access to capital that we've never had access to, or having some type of economic power that we've never really had. And I think people are actually really terrified of that. I think that there's more Black immigrants, especially, who are terrified of that than even white people. Just from what I'm seeing. Like, people will call us divisive and call us coons for working for ICE, but they do stuff like write books on why we don't deserve reparations. So is this not coonery? I would love to hear from somebody who's like Jamaican or Caribbean or even African. Is this not coonery? Is this not divisive? Is this not undermining? What do y'all think about that? Or y'all just ain't got nothing to say because when it comes to somebody doing something against us, it really don't matter?
A lot of people mistakenly think that reparations is supposed to be like an apology, which stems from a very Western idea of crime and punishment, which is like, oh, I did something wrong. Here, now I'm going to pay for it. That's not what reparations is. Reparations is a form of restorative justice. It's not so much focused on the past as it is the future. Because right now, race relations in America is fixated on a sticking point which is that Black people have been getting robbed. And you don't have to go back as far as sharecropping or slavery. Your parents' generation probably dealt with things like redlining, eminent domain, and urban renewal. These are processes that have consistently and systemically removed wealth from the Black community and taken it elsewhere. Like Malcolm X said, progress is not just removing the knife out of your back, it's healing the wound. Notice that he also didn't say that progress was litigating the person that stabbed you. That's not really what we're about here. But the best the Black community has ever gotten from America is promises that they won't do that specific form of oppression anymore. That's not progress. As someone who would never in a million years qualify for reparations, when you analyze Black American history, it is a history of getting robbed, and they're still getting robbed. And the thing is, the consequences of that robbery don't just fall onto the Black community. We all suffer because of this open wound that exists in our country. Until the United States can take accountability for the stolen wealth that it has built its empire upon, we can never fully progress. Reparations looks different in all cases, and we still don't know what it's going to look like for African Americans. But what we do know is that they're a necessary first step if this country ever wants to progress past this racial fixed point. If not, we're constantly going to be coming back to systemic racism and ultimately to slavery. Why are African Americans poor? Why are they less likely to own homes? Why do they go to jail more often? Why are they more likely to be the targets of environmental and medical racism? Because they keep getting robbed.
Reparations should be paid to Black Americans whose ancestors were enslaved in the United States. And this would require an expenditure of $14 trillion, which would be distributed evenly across the 40 million Black American descendants of U.S. slavery. That would be approximately $350,000 per person.
If you take $350,000 or $840,000 and you write a check to any group of people, Black, white, poor, homeless, whatever, you give any group of people that much money and say, there you go, best of luck. And you come back in 6 months, they're going to be broke. So whatever reparations are done, that would be an absolute disaster as opposed to guidance and help in creating generational wealth as opposed to income.
Right.
That would be an absolute disaster.
No one ever should.
Let me answer some of the questions that some of you might be asking yourselves. Let's start by having the common understanding on what reparations means.
Some define reparations as repairing past harms or atonement for sins, or more curtly, pay what you owe.
Then, since slavery has ended, why do Black Americans, until today, still asking for reparations?
Well, the descendants of formerly enslaved Black people are still waiting for the restitution from the effects of chattel slavery, which has touched every facet of Black life in this country since 1619.
White Americans living in America today have never lived during the period of slavery, and they have never done anything with slavery. So why do they have to pay for what their ancestors have done?
Even though slavery was abolished in 1864, the racist system in which the practice came from still plagues the community to this day. Black people are 20% more likely to be stopped without just cause than a white person. In California, the imprisonment rate of African American men is 10 times the rate of white men. Nationally, Black women are 3 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related causes than white women. In California, Black mothers are 4 to 6 times as likely to die from birth-related causes, and twice as likely to suffer maternal morbidity than all other racial groups. 3 out of 5 Black Americans live in communities with uncontrolled toxic waste sites, and Black applicants have an 80% higher mortgage denial rate compared to white applicants. So it's not a surprise that African Americans have repeatedly petitioned for reparations.
I can't agree with the idea that the Civil Rights Act of affirmative action should be called reparations. That does not make sense. Those changes did not benefit only Black Americans. Asians benefited, African immigrants benefited, Even poor white Americans gained from some of those systems. Reparations are supposed to be direct, something owed to a particular group because of a specific injustice. In this case, descendants of enslaved black Americans, not everybody. Not immigrants, not other communities, just the people whose ancestors went through that system. Now, another thing that I noticed, Professor Jackson kept speaking like he's a part of that same group, saying we like he is also a black American. Yes, he is American, but that's not the same thing. Being a black American is tied to a specific history in the United States. It's not just about being black and living in America. This should also be clarified because when you are speaking on issues like this, identity and history matters. And then this professor said that there's no financial compensation that is needed to be given to black Americans because slavery no longer exists. Even though slavery ended, the people didn't disappear. The descendants are still living in America and they are still dealing with the effects of what happened to their ancestors. Look at the wealth gap in America. Look at the access to opportunities. Look at how systems were built back then and how they still affect people today. Those things didn't just reset overnight. And Jackson said that white Americans living in America today have done nothing personally to black Americans, so they shouldn't be paying for what their parents have done. But you cannot ignore the fact that many of these white Americans have inherited wealth from their ancestors, and these ancestors have accumulated this wealth from the sweats, from the labor of black people who've spent more than 400 years working, being oppressed, not being paid. These people are still benefiting from the systems that were set by their ancestors until today. But I should also make this clear to y'all. When these black Americans are asking for reparations, they're not just asking reparation from the individual innocent Americans. Actually, they're asking money from the government because the American government have also benefited from the labor of their ancestors. If you look at the infrastructures that were built by these slaves, it's a lot. Black Americans, they're asking money from the US government, not from the individual innocent Americans. This should be clear. I also want to shout out to that black lady who spoke up. She said what many black Americans need to say, and she stood on it. Until black immigrants, I will say this respectfully. Black Americans already know what they are asking for. So instead of stepping in and trying to guide them on how they should speak or what they should demand, it is better to listen first. They are the ones living that reality. Now, he also mentioned that there is no more systemic racism in America. Is that really the case? I'm not American, I've never lived there. But from what I've heard from people who live there, many still say they experience it in different ways. So when someone says it no longer exists at all, it raises questions. Where is that conclusion coming from? Black Americans tell me. Now, let's talk about the guy that we've heard in the last clip. The white guy who said that black Americans should not receive reparations as direct payment because they might misuse the money. Who gave anyone the authority to decide how other groups should use what belongs to them? If something is owed, then it should be given. Simple. I know some black Americans may decide to pay their student loans with their reparation check. Others may even decide to take care of their families with that money. Some can even invest that money. Some can even enjoy it. They can go out for trips. That is their decision. Don't give someone what is theirs and then start controlling how they should spend it. That mindset comes from the assumption that black Americans don't know how to handle money, which is not true. There are many successful black Americans, millionaires, got even some billionaires. Some own their own businesses. Others are professionals. And even beyond that, the reason behind reparations is not just about money. It is about what money itself represents. It's about acknowledging that something was taken, something was built on unpaid labor, and that it has never been addressed. So this idea where people think that the reason why black Americans are asking for reparations is because they are black is not true. It's about what is owed to them. It's about the recognition that slavery has affected them. It's about healing from the consequences of slavery. So if you are an immigrant and you want to talk about slavery issues or how black Americans should behave or not behave. We've got to be very careful. For Black Americans, that is lived experiences. It is not just some theory that I've read in books back home or what I was told back home in your country. Black Americans are living these real experiences, so be careful when you're talking about Black Americans' issues. And again, listen to Black Americans, learn from them, and ask questions instead of assuming or get information from wrong sources. And one more thing as I conclude, Jamaicans and Black Americans, there is already love there, I know, and that love should not be affected by these kinds of debates. But we cannot also ignore the fact that respect matters, and calling out what doesn't sit right is the part of that respect. Shout out to all of the people who've been watching this video until this time. So I want you to tell me what you think about what Jason D. Hill has said about Black Americans' reparations. And as you're watching, please click on the like button. Remember to subscribe for the more upcoming episodes. See you next time. Ciao.